If you're trying to get high performance, then you have to understand the brain state that can allow for high performance to happen, right? And the reality of it is when a brain is stressed out or anxious or insecure or worried, it's not positioned to deliver optimally, right? And so particularly when we're thinking about sports or business or life, when the reality is of those things are often not ideal circumstances and just, sunshine and rainbows and easy, then even more, it's important that the brain is in a right state so that it can navigate challenges, so that it can problem solve, etc. And so what we know is that when the brain's in a positive state, it thinks more clearly, it thinks more creatively, and it problem solves better. And so
Hello. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. I am your host of the Elev8 podcast, Tyler Johnson. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Elev8 Educate Rejuvenate with the number 8 woven into those words. Today's guest I'm super excited to have with us. She is the host herself of the Building Championship Mindsets podcast. She's got a wonderful Tedx talk called Think Like a Champion Today. We'll link that up here. She's a speaker, trainer, performance consultant, and coach, as she is the founder of Selking Performance Group, emphasizing the power of mindset and leadership to drive lasting change. You can find her on Instagram and Twitter at Dr. Selking. Welcome to the show, Dr. Amber Selking. You have a PhD in applied sports psychology with an emphasis in positive psychology. Why should coaches emphasize positive psychology more than we might often see?
Yeah, at the end of the day, if you're trying to get high performance, then you have to understand the brain state that can allow for high performance to happen, right? And the reality of it is when a brain is stressed out or anxious or insecure or worried, it's not positioned to deliver optimally, right? And so particularly when we're thinking about sports or business or life, when the reality is of those things are often not ideal circumstances and just, sunshine and rainbows and easy, then even more, it's important that the brain is in a right state so that it can navigate challenges, so that it can problem solve, etc. And so what we know is that when the brain's in a positive state, it thinks more clearly, it thinks more creatively, and it problem solves better. And so as coaches, we need to be really mindful then about the words that we're using, the communication that we have with our student athletes, and the environment that we're creating so that we can, again, create optimal mental states to help athletes deal with the challenges that come up, whether it's, in the course of a competition or trying to navigate life outside of sport and then still show up and deliver within sport. And so, if coaches really are interested in having high performance from their athletes, then all the research would suggest that figuring out how to create a positive coaching environment would be most conducive for them accomplishing what it is they want to.
No doubt. Awesome stuff. So check out Amber's podcast, Building Championship Mindsets podcast. That's right?
Yep, that's it. Building Championship Mindsets.
As I'm recording some podcasts here and interacting guests, is there a lesson that sticks out from your podcast from people or just talking that has stuck with you through that process?
Man, I've been so blessed and fortunate to have had conversations with people from, all over the world and from all different sectors. And I think just, the reality of it is you can pull insights from anybody. It's so important to have a humble spirit, knowing that you can glean lessons from them. And I think that, just the importance of listening, when you're in the midst of a conversation, there might be some preset questions that you have, but really being able to hear what the person's saying and catch up on that so that you can ask more provocative questions. When I was doing my grad school work and in terms of qualitative research, our advisor used the analogy of sort of searching for gold nuggets. It's you don't just walk up to a rock and it's all one big thing of gold.
Right.
There's a lot of mining that has to happen. But if you're patient and you listen really well, you're certainly able to stumble across some of those, and you got to be sort of gentle pulling it out so that you can really walk away with the depth of the insight that the individual is trying to give you.
Awesome answer. Intuitive. So you're a pretty amazing athlete yourself. I know from Brittany Bach telling me a little bit about you. Can you talk about your athletic career and how it led to your professional career?
Yeah, so, I had the extreme fortune of playing soccer at the University of Notre Dame. My freshman year, we were undefeated and lost in the national championship game against North Carolina. So I'm still pretty salty against Baby Blue. But, the reality of it is I started playing soccer when I was 7 years old, and I had a dream to go play soccer at Division I. And I grew up in a small town in northeastern Pennsylvania where we have more cattle than humans and one stoplight, and so throughout the course of that, I always said I wanted to go to college to play soccer, and people are like, oh, okay, yeah, you're good. You can probably do that. And then when I realized, like, man, I think I want to go to Notre Dame, everybody was like, oh, well, you're good, but you're not like that good, and, you're too small and you're from a small town, and you're not even Catholic. And so, maybe readjust your sights. And so that made me want it even more, obviously.
Right.
And so I had actually committed to the Naval Academy my senior year of high school before I found out that I had gotten accepted to Notre Dame. So I was a preferred walk-on to ND, and really wrestled with that. Man, I committed to the Naval Academy, but in my heart, I made this deal with God that if I got into Notre Dame, which all stats should say that I shouldn't have, then I would go. And so I was sort of met with this dilemma, and I wrestled with it all season or all spring because of obviously those two things, my earthly word and then sort of my eternal word. And a month before I was supposed to leave for plebe summer, and 2 days before the Notre Dame deadline, I tore my first ACL in an indoor league. And I remember like falling to the ground and in my head thinking, well, I guess I'm going to Notre Dame, because I wouldn't be able to go through plebe summer, with a torn ACL, and the options just didn't look good. And so, Coach Waldrum thankfully said, I told you if you got in, you'd be on the team. So welcome home. And, so I redshirted my fall season that we went on this, amazing run, and played my spring season and thought I was coming back really well. I was that kid that at the end of every practice, I'd talk to my seniors and be like, how am I doing? What do I need to do better? Like, because I was crazy. And they were just like, no, you're doing well, Elev8, like, keep it up. We're excited to see you come back. And then I remember going into my end of year meeting my freshman year, and my coach said, like, how would you feel if you weren't on the team next year? And I just remember like my whole world sort of felt like it was crumbling. And I just looked at him and I was like, man, everything I've done since I've been 7 years old was because I wanted to go to college to play soccer. And I feel like I've been brought here to Notre Dame for a reason. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know. You tell me how I'm going to feel if it's gone. And they said, well, come back in a couple hours and we'll tell you what we decided. And so, I couldn't study, obviously, in the middle of finals. I couldn't study. I opened my email and I was getting daily devotionals from FCA at the time. And I remember, so let me back up just a second. As athletes, our numbers are super important to us. And so as the number one ranked team in the country, we were signing stuff for little girls like every day. There'd be posters in our locker, balls or whatever. And I would always sign it, Elev8, Jeremiah 29:11, right? Because, Jeremiah 11 was my number in high school. 29 was my number in college because 2 + 9 = 11. And Jeremiah 29:11, oh, it's a good verse. If anybody actually ever looks this up, it'll be good for them to read. So, I've literally been doing that every day for the last 7 months of my life. And I go after having this meeting with coach, and I sit down and I open this email from FCA, and it starts with Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans that I have for your life, says the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, to give you a hope and a future. And I think right then I knew that I was going to get released. And so, but then I was like, also, he's not going to see me cry anymore. So I like bit my lip up, and I went back for my meeting, and he said, we made the decision that because your knees just didn't come back the way we thought it would, and we've got a ton of girls coming in, that, you won't be on the team anymore. And I stood up and I shook his hand and I said, thank you for the opportunity. And I walked out, and I remember walking out and I was standing on the corner. Sorry, this is a long story, but
No,
I was standing on the corner, and, I was like, I'll go back to my dorm. And then I like stopped, and I was like, well, no, if I walk in my dorm and I'm not Amber, the soccer player, like, who am I, And then I started to walk the other way to the weight room, and I'm like, well, wait a second, I'm not an athlete anymore. Am I even allowed in the weight room? So I just stood there, and I remember feeling hollow for the first time in my life, from like the base of my head to the bottom of my stomach. And I wrestled with that. And I thought, like, all right, well, I'm going to transfer and play. I'm going to transfer and play somewhere. And, all the things you do to hold on as an athlete. And I remember like 2 days later, I ran into Harold Swanigan, who was a former basketball player at Notre Dame and was the faculty rep at this point for FCA on campus. And he said, hey, lad, I've been thinking, like, you should run FCA next year for Notre Dame. And I was like, Swanee, I'm not even an athlete, and I break down, and there's this huge guy, like trying to hug me. And he's like, man, listen, once an athlete, always an athlete. If you decide to come back, like, I think you're meant to do this. And so, that gave me a shred of hope. And I feel like at that moment I was like, man, I was brought to Notre Dame for a reason, but I was stubborn. I was too stubborn to think it would have been like absent of soccer. So God used soccer to get me here, and then was like, okay, young buck, here's what I really brought you here for.
Yeah.
And at that point, I think is when it really shifted for me. Like, man, I felt hollow, and I had this identity crisis, and I've got a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, and I've got a family at home that loves me. Like, imagine those people that don't have either of those, and they lose their sport. Like, what happens then? And so that was really the catalyst that got me into this sort of understanding of identity that deeper than the sport that you play or the role that you play. And while I did that throughout my time at Notre Dame with student athletes, I thought that was just my way to ease my ego out of sport. So I went into corporate America and lasted about a month there before I realized that I needed to be back in sport. But I had made a commitment to the company. So I was there for 2 years and then found sports psych and really realized that everything that I taught through Notre Dame Christian athletes in terms of identity and through the lens of faith, man, there was also a science behind this. And you can reach a much broader audience if you can understand the scientific side of it and draw those parallels and teach people from that regard. And so, that personal experience for me in my athletic career, I think was a catalyst to get me into sports psych and helping people understand, like, man, I can teach you how to be better at your sport by training your mental game, but I'm also confident that what you're going to learn through this is going to be great for you once that sport ends. And so again, that's sort of the foundation of the work that I do now, and why I do what I do, because I believe that, once an athlete, always an athlete, but we got to know how to tap into the power of that if we plan to do it in a way that's meaningful for ourselves and for the world.
Fantastic. You've had the opportunity to work with Notre Dame football. I know I'm a former college football player. What's one thing you wish all football players had a greater understanding of as they come into college football?
That is such a huge question. So I've got a couple bullets that I'm going to hit, but we could talk for an hour on all of them. So I think first and foremost, to understand that it's a process. We talk about that, but like, what really is your process and what does that mean? I think of, guys that we have that are older guys that are like studs now, and young guys come in and they want to be them right away. And the reality of it is, like, these dudes are studs now and maybe have been for 2 years, but when they came in as freshmen, like, they weren't. And it's a process, and it's okay that you're not the best right away, And so I think just helping guys wrap their head around that and understand that if they stay disciplined to that process early on, even when they might not be seeing the immediate results that they want, that it's worth it. And if they really want to be great bad enough, then they're willing to do what it takes to get there. And part of that is to really invest yourself and involve yourself in the process that your program has set up for you. So that would be number one. The second is that you can talk about emotions and it doesn't need to be an emotional conversation, you know? And I think that's why I love working with guys is, because, and women too. I mean, it just doesn't matter. Like, emotions are important and they really dictate a lot of how we are able to show up and deliver in the moment. But most of us, particularly as athletes, are conditioned to think that emotions are bad. And so we suppress them or act like they don't exist. And really, those are just waiting to come up in any moment to derail the mission that you're on. And so as we can give individuals language around how to articulate emotions and emotional experiences, and then how to process those better, I just firmly believe that we can help people just find the joy in sport, you know, and really the love of the game that we talk about and hope for. But that the higher up in competition you go, a lot of times we get stripped of because people don't know how to talk about just the human element of the experience.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think know that it's a process, trust the process, engage in the process, understand that emotions aren't bad, and we can talk about them in a non-emotional way. And then I think the next is that the two things of, you know, sport, focus and mental toughness, you know, those can be trained. It's not you have it or you don't. And at the end of the day, the brain isn't a muscle in the scientific sense, but it functions like a muscle in the extent that the parts of it that we use grow and get stronger, and the parts of it that we don't get weaker. And so things like focus, things like mental toughness, things like confidence, all of those elements can be trained and conditioned if you're willing to integrate mental performance training into how you go about your preparation process.
Right on. Yourself as an athlete or as through your professional journey, is there someone that's elevated your game the most as a person, and how so?
So, I mean, per my earlier story, my faith's really important to me. And so I think, you know, whatever your faith background is or isn't, having a broader perspective on life is critical, I think, to being able to navigate the highs and lows of high performance. And so, you know, my personal relationship with God and my faith, you know, in times of struggle and wrestle have been really critical. Understanding that, you know, it's trial that produces perseverance, and it's perseverance that produces confidence. And those are all elements that we really want in ourselves as high performers. And then, you know, I would say my mom, she has just been a force in my life, obviously, since I've been little, and has just really always challenged me to keep, you know, my eyes up and my feet forward, and to not get caught up in the bullshit of a lot of mediocrity that exists in this world. And I'm just really grateful for that. You know, like when I got my little funk with my knee, I was like, forget it. I'm not going to Notre Dame. I'm not going to Navy. I'm just going to stay here at home and go to this local school. And she was like, oh, good. Throw your whole future away because you hurt your knee. Your knee's a long way away from your heart. So you need to figure it out. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, she gave me sympathy for as long as like she could. And then it was like, all right, you know, don't make decisions about your future based on where you're at in the present. Like, and I think that that's a really powerful lesson of if we can make decisions in the present based on the perspective of our future, I think we make a lot better decisions. So God, my mama, and then, you know, my husband now is my best friend, and he keeps me grounded. He gives me perspective. You know, it's like, who's the mental coach for the mental coach? It's him. So I'm just really grateful for that. And then have been blessed with amazing mentors in my life. Athletically, my strength coaches have always been huge in my life. And a lot of professional mentors as well that just help me process decisions, you know, and that's important.
I hear you on the spouse. My wife totally called me out a couple days ago. I was like, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
I'm not eating what I'm speaking right now. That's the great truth teller. So,
yeah, they are.
As you probably see with college athletes and working around performance, I see a great deal with high school athletes and a little bit of college student athletes, just this elevated level of anxiousness that sometimes is almost palpable, and you can almost feel it from a variety of different angles and kind of this world they're growing up in. What's one tool or something that comes to mind that you use just to help kids relieve some of that anxiety, just to perform and just be present?
Yeah, good question. I think I'll give you a couple general things and then I'll sort of be a little bit more specific. I think first and foremost, really, like, dude, it's your life. It's not your parents' life. It's not your coach's life. It's not anybody else's. Like, if you want to do this, do it. If you don't, don't. And if you want to do it, then make it the experience that you would have it to be, not at the mercy of anybody else. And so helping kids remember that is important. And I think the next part of that then is, okay, so once I know that, then what? I think, a lot of anxiety is created due to lack of perceived control over situations or environments. And so, I always start with helping people understand just the power of their thoughts. And the reality of it is we each get to control our thoughts. Now, we can't always control the thoughts that come into our head, but we can control if we hold on to those thoughts and allow them to repeat and replay and build mindsets, or if we release those and replace them with right ways of thinking about situations. And so, just helping people understand that they can choose to think right in the midst, moment by moment, is a critical first step. And then, when I first started working with athletes, they would say, like, hey, I want to work on my confidence. So we start working on confidence, and like 3 sessions in, you realize, man, you don't have a confidence problem. You've got an attentional control problem. And because you know how to manage your attention, you're not confident in the moment of execution, right? Or it's like, man, I have anxiety. I don't know how to manage my emotions in performance. So you start working on that, and 3 sessions in, you realize that they don't really have an anxiety problem. They've got an awareness problem. And because they're not aware of these 3 things, it creates anxiety in the moment. And by the time they're there, they're all out of sorts and they can't get back, right? So I developed this program called Building Your Mental Performance Foundation, which is 8 building blocks of just the mental game that are sequentially ordered and build on one another. That what I've found over the last 8 years of doing this with everybody from my little guys, my little 8-year-olds that I work with, to my pros that I work with, to my executives that I work with. Now we just draw more pictures and giggle a little bit more with the little guys than we do with the execs. But what I found is that through that process, it really helps people understand how their brain works, how it impacts their bodies, and that is really how they're showing up in the moment, and then giving them tools and strategies to manage their mind to deliver their best in the moment. And what I found is that then all of a sudden they have the tools to self-manage, whether they think they're having a confidence problem or an emotional control problem. Now they've just got a foundation that they can always go back to navigate through that. And it's been really powerful.
If you're listening, I hope you took some notes. That was some awesome stuff shared with us right there. You've talked a little bit about your journey and your road to Notre Dame. If you could get in that DeLorean, go back to the future and visit 16-year-old self from your journey, what's the one piece of advice you'd want to give 16-year-old Amber?
It's an interesting question. I've thought about that for a while since you posed these to me. I would just tell her to stay hopeful, and stay disciplined. And honestly, when I look back, like, I think I was, and that's what I'm so grateful for, is like every phase of my season, phases and seasons that I've been through in life. Like I remember when I was little, like just wanting to make greatness in the world. Like I just wanted to do big stuff, and I was convinced that God was going to have me do that, and so everything I did like was oriented towards that. And I look back and I don't feel like I've had a season where I got hopeless that greatness wasn't going to happen, or that I didn't feel like the greatness that I was doing in the moment wasn't important. I think sometimes as adults, we can look at kids and like they take things so seriously and we're like, chill out, but like that's the most important part of their lives right now. Like, and I took my life so seriously, like in a healthy way, not like anxiety provocative way, but like I thought what I was doing when I was 16 was important. And I think that I would just encourage her that it really is important, and it's going to be an important foundation to what you're going to do in the next season of your life. And then that's going to be for the next season and for the next season. And so, and that's not to say I haven't been through hard seasons, because I've been through some really hard seasons in life, ones that I've created on my own because of some poor decision making, right?
Yeah.
And others, because other people telling me that my dreams couldn't actually come to fruition. Like, I'd never work in college football because, I'm a girl, and they're not about the mental game and all the stuff, and being courageous enough to fight through that and believing in it. And so, I would just say that to everybody right now, is regardless of where you're at in your journey, like, what you're doing right now matters. And it's either going to matter to the greatness that you make or to the mediocrity that you make. And so be mindful of that, because it's important.
It all matters. So true. Favorite question to end the show, I like to ask, what's your definition of success? How do you view that in the world and in your life?
I view success as doing the most with what you've got. And, whatever lot you've been given, being able to optimize that. And no one's better or worse among that, but, being disciplined and intentional about, bringing to fruition what's been put in front of you. And if you do that, then I think that that's a success.
Awesome. Great stuff. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing a little about your story, journey, and professional career. It was great stuff. I can't thank you enough.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tyler. I appreciate the work that you do, and you pouring into coaches' labs and kids' labs, and everybody that you intersect with. Your work matters. It's super important, and it's been a blessing just getting to talk with you and spend some time. It's always fun to jab with people who have a similar mindset and heart set, and desire to make some greatness in this world. So thanks for having me on, but thanks for who you are and all you do for this world.